I remember the way things used to be, the quiet rhythm of our lives, the small routines that felt like the backbone of something solid. Every morning, I'd wake before dawn, the world still wrapped in darkness, and make coffee just how he liked it, black, no sugar. He'd be waiting, already dressed, his eyes still heavy with sleep, but carrying that familiar, warm glance that said, "We're in this together." That morning light through the window, the soft hum of the city waking up, it was our sanctuary. He wasn't just someone in my life, he was the person I trusted with everything. Years of shared secrets, of plans whispered in the dark. The kind of bond where silence wasn't empty, but full of understanding, of comfort. He was my partner, my closest friend, maybe the only one who ever really knew me. Our lives intertwined in a way that felt unbreakable. The way he smiled when I succeeded, how he held me steady when I faltered. The late-night talks about dreams, fears, and everything in between. He was my anchor, the one I leaned on when the world threatened to crumble. I believed we were invincible, like we had built a fortress around us that nothing could breach. I'd describe my world back then as orderly, even if it was fragile beneath the surface. Every day followed a pattern that gave me comfort. Wake up, work, call him at lunch, meet for dinner, fall asleep with his voice in my ear. It was steady, predictable. I held on to it like it was the only thing that mattered. But beneath that order, there were cracks I ignored, little things that never quite settled right. The times he'd come home late, smelling faintly of something unfamiliar. The vague excuses that slipped out when I asked. Work ran late or just needed some air. His phone, always locked, his messages disappearing faster than I could blink. I told myself I was overthinking, that love means trusting someone even when things don't add up. So I pushed the unease down, wrapped it up in rationalizations, telling myself it was nothing, that I was just imagining shadows. Still, that whisper of doubt lingered, like a ghost in the back of my mind I couldn't shake. I'd catch myself glancing at his phone when he left it unattended, heart pounding with the fear of what I might find, but never acting on it. I clung to the memories of his touch, the warmth of his smile, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. I wanted to believe. I needed to believe. The day it all shattered started like any other. The sun was low, casting long shadows through our apartment. I was cleaning up the kitchen, humming quietly, when his phone buzzed on the counter. He wasn't home yet, and for once, it was unlocked. I told myself I wouldn't look, but my fingers moved before my mind caught up. There it was, a message, brief and cold, from a name I didn't recognize. Not a friendly text or a work-related ping, something different. I hesitated, then opened the message thread. Screenshots, messages with coded words, mentions of places I'd never heard him talk about. And then a photo. Him, in a place he'd never told me about, with someone else, someone who wasn't me. The image burned into my mind, fracturing everything I thought I knew. The world tilted on its axis, the floor beneath me crumbling. I sat down heavily, the phone slipping from my hand. That secret, once hidden in the shadows, now glared at me like a neon sign screaming the truth. I wasn't just a fool. I was a stranger in the life I thought I shared with him. The silence that followed was suffocating. The air felt thicker, colder. I wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there, but the weight of betrayal pinned me down. The fortress we built, it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to someone else, a stranger I had loved blindly. I remember staring out the window that night, the city lights flickering like distant stars, each one a reminder of how far I'd fallen into a maze of lies. My mind raced, desperate to find answers, to make sense of the secret that had ripped apart the fabric of my life. And in that moment, something inside me changed. Because some betrayals don't just break trust, they ignite a darkness you never knew you had. The moment I uncovered his secret, the ground beneath me gave way. The weight of that truth pressed down so hard I could barely breathe. I remember the exact feeling, like standing in the middle of a storm, rain pelting my skin, thunder booming in my ears, but no one around to shelter me. I was completely exposed, vulnerable in a way I'd never been before. I wanted to believe it wasn't real. I told myself it had to be a mistake, some cruel trick of light or a misinterpreted message. But the evidence was there, undeniable, etched into my mind like a scar. His face in that photo, smiling, casual, while I was left in the dark, the one he'd betrayed. Everything unraveled after that. I started replaying our past in my head, searching for signs I'd missed. Every late night, every vague excuse, every quiet moment when he suddenly grew distant. I sifted through memories like ashes, wondering which ones were real and which were just part of the lie. That night when he promised he was working late but smelled like another woman's perfume. The weekend he disappeared without a word, saying he needed space. But space from who? From me? My world tilted again and again. Trust, once a foundation, crumbled into dust. Every time he looked at me, I searched for the cracks in his gaze, the flicker of guilt, the shadow of fear. But he kept his mask perfectly intact. The paranoia settled in like poison. I found myself watching him when he thought I wasn't looking, checking his phone when he left it unattended, though my heart screamed at me to stop. I scrutinized his messages, analyzing every word, every pause, every read receipt. The man I thought I knew became a stranger, a cold, calculating stranger, hiding behind my face, our shared history, our laughter, our lies. I confronted him once, carefully, never outright, always cautious, as if testing the waters of his deception. "You've been distant," I said one evening, voice low, trying to keep the tremor out. He smiled, that familiar smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's nothing, just work stress. You worry too much." Gaslighting. I felt it slide over me like ice, numbness where fire should have been. I wanted to scream, to shove the truth in his face, but instead, I swallowed my anger, afraid to shatter what little control I had left. Friends and family, when I dared to hint at my suspicions, turned away. Some whispered that I was being paranoid, that I was tearing us apart over nothing. Others sided with him without question, believing the polished facade he showed the world. The isolation tightened its grip, making me feel smaller, like I was losing not just him, but myself. The secret was more than a betrayal of trust. It seeped into every corner of my life. He had siphoned money from accounts we shared, funding an existence parallel to the one I thought we built together. I found withdrawals I couldn't explain, bills for hotels, dinners, gifts to someone else, all hidden behind carefully constructed lies. The financial hit was devastating, but it was the emotional blow that left the deepest wound. Every dollar stolen felt like another piece of my soul ripped away. I wrestled endlessly with what to do next. Should I confront him openly and risk everything falling apart in a storm of accusations and lies? Or should I keep silent, protect myself from the fallout, and try to heal quietly, alone? The betrayal wasn't just an external wound. It burrowed into my very sense of self, shattering the reflection I had of who I was. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who had shattered my reality and left me to pick up the pieces in the cold silence that followed. It took longer than I ever wanted to admit before I reached the edge, the point where silence turned into a poison I could no longer swallow. There was a moment, one cold evening, when the weight of everything crashed down so heavily that I couldn't breathe, think, couldn't pretend. I remember sitting across from him in our kitchen, the air thick with unspoken words, my voice barely a whisper. "Why?" I asked, eyes searching his face for anything, remorse, truth, regret. But all I saw was a blank stare, a wall I couldn't breach. His answer was cold and simple. "It doesn't matter anymore." Those words hit me harder than any slap, harder than any fight. They weren't just dismissive, they were the death knell for everything I thought we had. In that moment, I understood that passive suffering would destroy me. I could feel it like a slow rot eating away at my soul. To remain silent, to be the victim, was to accept erasure of my worth, my dignity, my identity. So I made a decision, not one born of fury or blinding rage. No, this was colder, sharper. It was the clarity that comes when you stop fighting the storm and start learning how to wield it. The internal battle was brutal. Part of me wanted to crumble, to hide, to disappear beneath the weight of betrayal and humiliation. But another part, quieter yet fiercer, awakened, a raw, unyielding desire to reclaim what had been stolen from me. I wasn't just fighting for justice, I was fighting for control. Control over a life that had been hijacked, for the narrative that had been rewritten behind my back. And so, I turned from victim to avenger. The transformation wasn't immediate. It began. There were no rash moves, no dramatic confrontations. Everything was measured, deliberate. Every step was taken with the cold calculation of someone who knows the stakes and refuses to lose. Revenge was no longer about rage. It was about restoring balance, about asserting my agency in a life that had been stolen and reshaped without my consent. And as I laid each brick of my plan, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. A silent power that whispered, this time, I would be the one writing the story. The plan didn't come all at once. Revenge, I learned, isn't a lightning strike. It's a slow burn, a careful calculation. I spent nights hunched over a desk littered with papers, spreadsheets, and tabs open on my laptop that showed every detail I could find about him: his routines, his contacts, his weak spots. I became a ghost in my own life, silently observing, quietly collecting. Every piece of evidence was a brick in the wall I was building, not to trap him, but to expose him in a way so undeniable, so perfect, that no one could turn away or pretend they didn't see. I had to be meticulous. One wrong move, one flash of emotion, and everything could come crashing down on me instead. I wasn't the type to lose control, but this required a different discipline. To suppress the urge to lash out, to keep my face calm when my mind screamed with fury. I learned to wear my emotions like a mask, cold and unreadable. It was a performance, a delicate balance between calculated patience and barely contained fire. There were moments, countless ones, when doubt clawed at me. Was this really worth it? The cost I'd pay if it failed? The loneliness, the sleepless nights, the gnawing anxiety in my gut that maybe I was becoming the very thing I despised. I questioned my own morality more times than I'd care to admit. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just revenge. It was reclaiming my life from the wreckage he left behind. I reached out quietly, carefully. An old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone with the skills to help me dig deeper into his digital world. Our meetings were discreet, a nod here, a whispered conversation there, always in shadows. I built a network of information, a web of truths that started closing in around him. Surveillance wasn't about paranoia, it was precision. Tracking his movements, his meetings, the times he slipped away without explanation. I learned the rhythm of his deception, the patterns that betrayed the cracks in his armor. Each silent observation was a step closer to the truth, a step closer to control. Throughout it all, I held on to rituals, small, symbolic acts that grounded me. A single cup of black coffee every morning, no distractions. A leather-bound notebook where I documented every detail, every feeling, every plan. These rituals weren't just habits, they were lifelines, reminders that beneath the cold exterior, I was still human, still fighting to hold on to who I was. As the pieces fell into place, I crafted the perfect moment, one where his facade would crumble, not with noise or fury, but with the quiet, devastating weight of undeniable proof. The calm before the storm was almost unbearable, but I welcomed it. I was no longer the broken victim. I was the architect of my own justice, patient and relentless. The storm was coming, and when it did, it would be precise, sharp, and most of all, final. The day came quietly, like a predator stalking its prey in the stillness before dusk. Everything was in place, every thread carefully pulled, every move timed with precision. I remember the weight of the air that morning, heavy but calm, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I walked into the room where it all would unfold, my face an unreadable mask. Around me, whispers of conversations, the hum of lives unknowingly caught in the web I had spun. He was there too, calm on the surface, but I could see it in his eyes, the faint tremor of unease, the flicker of doubt that betrayed his confidence. The secret I held was no longer hidden in shadows. It was a weapon, silent but lethal, ready to dismantle the empire of lies he had built. I watched as the first cracks appeared, subtle shifts in his posture, a tightened jaw, hands that no longer rested easy. The walls he thought impenetrable were crumbling, not with shouts or violence, but with the cold, relentless truth. He tried to deflect, to deny. "You don't understand," he said, voice low, strained. "This isn't what it looks like." But I held steady, my voice calm, cutting through the fog of his excuses. "I know exactly what it is." There was no need for theatrics, no raised voices or dramatic accusations. The power was in the silence between us, in the knowledge that the truth had already spoken louder than any words. Around us, faces shifted, from disbelief to shock, from loyalty to doubt. The carefully constructed illusion began to unravel, exposing the raw reality beneath. I saw his desperation grow, the fragile mask slipping away, revealing a man cornered by his own deceit. I could have destroyed him outright, left him shattered and broken. But revenge isn't always about ruin. Sometimes it's about reclaiming control, about asserting the balance that was stolen. And as I laid each judge and executioner, not with anger, but with cold, measured authority, the silence between us was a sentence, final and unyielding. Even as the room held its breath, I felt the weight of what I'd done settle into my bones. Justice had been served, but it came with scars, some visible, others hidden deep beneath the surface. Revenge is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. The satisfaction of triumph mingled with a quiet ache, a reminder that no victory comes without cost. As he stood there, exposed and defeated, I understood something profound. In the pursuit of justice, we lose pieces of ourselves. The question is, what are we willing to sacrifice to reclaim what was taken? And in the cold aftermath, I was left to carry those scars, silent reminders of a battle fought not with fists, but with patience, pain, and quiet power. The silence after the storm was deafening. The world didn't explode in chaos I had half expected, no shouting matches or violent outbursts. But the stillness that followed carried its own weight, heavy and unrelenting. Lives shifted in ways that couldn't be undone. Trust fractured beyond repair. Relationships I thought were ironclad turned brittle, cracking under the pressure of truth. He retreated, a man diminished, not just in stature, but in spirit. The facade that held his carefully curated world together lay in ruins. Friends I once thought loyal drifted away, unwilling or unable to reconcile the man they believed in with the one the truth revealed. For me, the aftermath was a tangled web of emotions I hadn't anticipated. Relief, yes. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing justice quietly served, in reclaiming the narrative that had been stolen from me. But alongside that relief was an emptiness, a hollow space carved out by years of pain and betrayal that no victory could fill. Regret lingered too, not for the revenge itself, but for what it demanded of me. The late nights spent consumed by planning, the isolation born of mistrust, the loss of innocence that comes when you realize the people you loved can become strangers so completely. I was no longer the person who uncovered that secret in the dark, the betrayed, the victim. I had transformed, steeled by pain, sharpened by resolve, and forever changed by the choices I made. Yet beneath the surface, the wounds were slow to heal. Trust, once shattered, is a fragile thing to rebuild. The world feels colder now, the edges sharper. I find myself watching, waiting, hesitant to let anyone too close. The scars aren't just reminders of past battles, they are shields against future ones. But within that guarded shell, something unexpected has taken root: resilience. A quiet strength born not from innocence regained, but from hard-won control. From the knowledge that no matter how deep the betrayal, I can rise. That I can carve out my own space in a world built on fragile loyalties. Sometimes I sit alone in the quiet moments, holding that leather-bound notebook, tracing the ink of the plans that changed everything. The flicker of a candle casts shadows on the walls, dancing like ghosts of the past. And I think about what it all means. True peace, I realize, is elusive. Revenge may balance the scales, but it doesn't erase the stains left behind. It doesn't undo the fractures within. It's a shadow that follows, a silent companion in the dark. But it's mine, the choice I made, the path I walked. And as the candle flickers and fades, I understand this: betrayal cuts deep, revenge changes us, and the only certainty is that the scars, visible and hidden, will remain forever.